I do social media and marketing for up and coming and established companies. And then on the side, which because of COVID, I was able to launch my podcast, Speaking Our Language, which is a podcast dedicated to helping young people figure out life together.
I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Content is Cream, which is now a podcast, marketing, PR and production agency. So we do everything in podcast, from marketing right through to actually making the shows. Before that, I was the CEO of the UK's first and only diverse podcast network called the Shout Out Network, and was behind the launch of like 9 different shows, all from underrepresented content creators.
So I ended up taking a podcasting class my last semester of college, and that kind of just opened my doors to like structure and seeing like how they actually come to life and the amount of work that goes into it. And then figuring out how I could create my own lane and own conversation around my experiences of being a young person of color in America.
A colleague mentioned Serial. She's like, you have to listen to this show, it's amazing. So unfortunately I have like the most cliched podcast entry experience, because my introduction to it and listening to my first ever show was Serial, and I became like completely in love with the format.
Image and visuals are very good for catching people's attention, but I didn't want that to be the sole reason for why you're listening. I think that's what audio does so well, is it allows people to just listen and envision and, you know, have their own stake in the conversation.
Having visuals on your social media, capturing those like little video moments, those behind the scene moments, or putting you like basically being a public figure or aspiring to be a public figure on Twitter, for example, which is where I first grew my first show, was just essential, because how would people know that it was a safe space for them to come?
We had a framework of different topics like mental health and self-awareness and expectations, and we kind of had these like on like the lineup, but it was kind of like what feels right now, and like what would resonate right now, and like having that flexibility to not be so tied to one conversation, because there's enough space for all these different conversations. They don't have to happen right now.
The one thing I always advise is talk about the thing that you know the most about. Always talk about the thing you know the most about. I mean, current affairs aside, you really need to be able to sustain a show. Consistency is the one thing that will make sure that your podcast is successful.
Creating a podcast, can be very stressful with editing audio, like agreeing on content and like the tone. So like really understanding people's strengths and weaknesses and like really playing to that adds to the chemistry, because there's less stress across the board.
You want to pick someone that you get on with, but always test, have recordings that you may never release, and just sit down together, talk together.
It's not about having the most expensive set of things. You honestly just need a mic, some headphones, and, you know, have some type of equipment to edit. That's all I had when I was in California, and I was doing all the editing and like redoing voices and stuff. So it's like, if you just have that and you know your why, you'll be fine.
So having access to, you know, a quiet space. It does not need to be a studio. You can record with a USB microphone under your duvet. Like during lockdown, I was underneath the duvet doing all of my intros and outros. And like sometimes it was a duvet plus a blanket, and I was just there sweating, like, come on, just get this line out.
Meeting them where they are and where they're most engaged is like step one, like identifying like what platforms are they most on, what is like the most effective way to like build that dialogue and that like trust between the listener that you're looking for.
You basically have to know your listener, or have an idea of who they are or who you want them to be, before you kind of go onto the show and start trying to find them, because you know ultimately you're going to know what kind of messaging is going to move them. And then it is just honestly, it is a case of throwing whatever you can at them and seeing what works. I wish I could say like, if you do X, Y, and Z, it's going to work. It doesn't work like that.